Okay, so today's victim is a 1985 Corvette, starts and dies. Let me show you what it's doing. Of course, I got a fuel pressure issue, I know that. So here's the gauge, I'm going to show you what's going to happen. Uh-oh. That's a habit. Let's try it again. Just can't, I barely got any fuel pressure at all. I'm gonna get maybe 10 psi. Okay, here's a better view of the Schrader valve where you screw your gauge onto, and I think what was I getting before, maybe 10 psi, and it would just start and die and give me fits. So it's either the fuel pump or fuel filter, most likely. So I'm gonna go after the fuel filter first. It's a little bit easier to get to, and be lucky if it is. If not, then I'll go after the fuel pump. Okay, so here is, where's that? There you are. So there's the fuel filter. Don't have much room to work, so I'm going to jack this up, but be mindful dealing with these. This is 85 Corvette, a lot of fiberglass under here. You got to be careful where you put your jack. You can actually see where somebody in the past put a floor jack under here and damaged the fiberglass. It's been since repaired. So you got to get in here. You can see you got these little marks here where you're supposed to, if you use the factory jack, it fits right on this little rail under here. There it is, that metal rail. But you got to be careful you don't hit the fiberglass right here and break anything. But I'm gonna go up a little bit more and get onto the rail here and carefully jack this up. Try not to damage anything where I can get under there better. Maybe get some jack stands under it. Okay, here we are under the Corvette. You see I got a jack stand up front. I got a jack stand in the rear right there. Okay. Plus I got the hydraulic jack still supporting it just slightly. So never get under a car without some jack stands. And to get this loose, you need a, how did I say what this wrench is? Can't see where it, 13/16. Okay, it's a 13/16 and a 5/8 line wrench. So I've already broke them loose. It's no problem. This little clamp here, that's a 10mm bolt on the top. So I'm gonna loosen this up, pull the filter out, see if it's clogged. If not, then I'll go to the filter. Then I'll go to the fuel pump. All right, get your pan to catch the fuel as it comes out. Seems to be quite a bit, because also it could be under pressure when you first break it loose, so be careful of that. Okay, kind of pretty much what I figured. I can blow right through it. So, in fact, I remember at some point in time I've changed this, but it's probably been many years ago. I think we've had this Corvette for 15 years or better. So I can blow right through it, so that's good. So now we got to look at the fuel pump, troubleshoot that. And another tip for you to make getting the fuel filter out easier is take this other 10mm bolt out, and that'll allow your lines to separate more. So I'm just gonna pop that back together, tighten everything up, and then we'll go look at the fuel pump. So if you're trying to troubleshoot your Corvette as far as the fuel pump or the reason why it's not starting, something you should Google is Corvette C4 start sequence. It will break down for you step by step what has to happen before the engine to start. Like when you turn on the key, the fuel pump engages for 2 seconds, pressurizes the fuel rail. Then as you start to crank, at that point, there's a switch right down here. You can see those like red and orange wire. That's an oil pressure switch. It closes and tells the fuel pump, okay, it's okay to turn yourself on. We now have oil pressure. Let's pump up the pressure so we can get this engine started. And at that point, you'll get some pulses from the distributor. The distributor talks to the ECM. The ECM says, okay, the distributor's turning, the engine's cranking. Let's start firing the injectors. It starts firing the injectors. Once the engine starts and catches, then it closes the fuel pump relay. All these things have to take place for the fuel pump to come on and stay on. But there's a trick if you want to test the fuel pump without testing all this other stuff. We just want to make sure, we want to force the fuel pump on. So I'm going to show you how I've done that. Okay, so here we are on the driver's side. This little device right here normally has a little cap on it. Looks like that. Take that cap off. You got some connections right here. Okay, and this is number what's called G. And if you apply 12 volts to it, it will force the fuel pump to come on. So let's do that real quick and see what kind of pressures we have. Okay, now the tool I'm using to do this is a great troubleshooting tool, because when I push this button, the tip will apply 12 volts. So I'm going to put this in here, then I'm going to stand up and look at the fuel gauge that I've hooked up on the fuel rail and see what kind of pressures we get. I'm trying to do all this one-handed. Okay, you see our gauge is sitting on 0 psi. I'm going to apply power, see what happens. Get down here. Okay, got a probe in there. All right, I'm going to push the button and apply power to the fuel pump. I hear it running, and it's barely got me any pressure at all, hardly. Just a couple of psi. So I think that's our problem. Okay, let's dig into the fuel pump. Step 1, get you a T10 Torx. There it is, T10, that's one I used. Take out these 4 little screws right here. Easy peasy. Alright, we'll get this rubber piece out of the way. Be careful not to knock any debris in there. And I think there's a few more screws to get out. Okay, another tip, be sure to shove your rag down in there, because as you pull this out, you're going to most likely knock some dust in there. We don't want to do that. There we go. We should be in control. Of course, doing the one hand makes it a little more difficult. There it is. All right. Got that out. And now we can see our fuel lines, return line. I guess we've got a vacuum. Maybe it's a vent line. I don't know how many lines we got here. All right, let's get us a ratchet, an extension, and start taking this apart. Okay, there's one more little test I thought I would do before I pull the pump out, is just to confirm I have a good ground and a good source of 12 volt. So in case you're wondering, I had to do some research to find out what wire was what. So the black wire is ground and the blue wire is our hot, and then our pink wire is our sending unit. So I hooked this up, put it on 12 volt scale. I had to work quick because I had to turn the key on, and it's only hot for 12 seconds. After 12 seconds not 12 seconds, it's only hot for 2 seconds. After 2 seconds it goes off, so I had to do it kind of quickly to confirm I had a good 12 volt source. So I know we are getting 12 volts to the pump, so now I can proceed to take the pump out. Okay, another tip, be gentle working these lines off. Kind of squeeze them, work them back and forth. Let the fuel start rolling around them, so kind of get the line wet. Then carefully push them back, because see, it's a special line, it's crimped back there. You don't want to get carried away and start cutting on this line thinking you can just shove it back on there. You may not have enough line. Okay, the screws are out. Got the fuel lines out kind of out of the way. Don't know if I can get this out with one hand or not, but we're going to try. It looks like. Alright. Okay. You can tell we've got a full tank of gas, so we know we're not out of gas. Okay, now I'll take this to the bench and take it apart and see if I can't see what's wrong with it. Well, I have found the problem. Got me a little gas in the jug here, powering it with a 12 volt lawnmower battery, and it has just pathetic flow and hardly no pressure at all. I can hold it off. No wonder that car wouldn't run. So I guess we're going to be getting a new fuel pump. Well, my pump has come in, but of course, like any project, there's always problems. But according to Delphi, this is the replacement pump for a 1985 Corvette. But then again, I'm going to do a little modification. Did you see it's a Delphi? Where's my box? Here's my box. There's the number I ordered. And also I got the fuel strainer. Also a Delphi item. The good stuff. In doing my research, I noticed you can pick up pumps for as little as $18, $19. But there's no way I was going to put no $18 fuel pump on my wife's Corvette just to have her be stranded somewhere. That would be a long ride home. Wouldn't like that. So I got the best what I think I can get, which is a Delphi. This is only like 55 bucks maybe for a good quality pump. But I should have noticed this, but I did not. The connection is a little bit different. So I got these big wide spade connectors on the old pump. This one's got these little bitty dudes. So I thought, well, I called Delphi. I said, what's the part number for this connector? And Delphi told me they don't offer that connector. That's an OEM item. So GM offers that item. Luckily, I went to a local parts store and they dug around. They had a box of wires. They had one of these connectors laying in a box that they gave to me. So there we go, getting the camera shot. Ta-da! So I lucked out on that. Otherwise, that would have been a pain trying to wait and deal with. So if you got an 85 Corvette, before you order parts, look at your connections. And when you order your pump, look at the connection on it. I've seen other videos on YouTube where some pumps are different. And who knows? I'm assuming this is the original. It looks like it is because all these wires have never been cut or removed. So I've got the original pump from 1985, so it's 36 years old. But now I got to do a little modification to actually make this work because things are a little bit different. So let me do a little thinking here, and I'll get back with you. Okay, I'll show you some of my problems. Here's the original pump. And originally we had this little doodad right here. See that? And it fit in there just right. And then your sock pushes down on there. But this one's made a little bit different. And it comes with this little rubber sleeve, but it don't really line up exactly right. But I do know I have to get it in here in this position and still have enough room to press in that sleeve. And the tolerance is pretty tight right there. But I think it will work. So I noticed they do send some other items like this. I didn't like that, but they send this sleeve. I think this will work for me. Now I've rebent this. This was opened up a lot wider. So I've rebent it a little bit tighter. So it will kind of, with this rubber sleeve on there, it'll hug that pump nice and snug. And then I'll wrap me a hose clamp around it. And I think that's going to work out pretty good. Because I guess this rubber is just to keep the noise down. So you don't, if you had this right on metal, metal vibration will transfer through the car and you might be able to hear the fuel pump running. So let me go a little bit further and see what I come up with. Okay, well here's my dry run. I'm going to leave the rubber extend down just a little bit. So that'll provide me some cushion at the bottom. Looks like that's going to work. I got a kind of a snug fit here. Get me a hose clamp on it. My pipes seem to line up good, and I believe this is called, I think this is like a fuel dampener. I'm assuming that's what that does. So I'm going to put that back in there. There's nothing wrong with that. So that is going to be my plan of attack, and I think that'll work well, and I can still get my sock on there. And so let's get some hose clamps and keep moving forward. Okay, to help facilitate this, I'm going to put a little silicone spray on those rubber pieces in there. See if this won't go together pretty easy, hopefully. Okay. That looks fine. Get my hose clamp on there. I'll snug this up and I think we'll be in good shape. Well, I know you're going to be shocked and surprised, but I got another problem. So now, I know it's doing a dry run, putting it together. Things didn't look exactly right. So I took things apart to see what was going on. First of all, let me show you. Originally, this is what we have. Like that. We got that spacer, and that spacer is important because that keeps the distance between this opening and this opening equal. Without that spacer, this could drop down and possibly could unplug from the top and you lose all your fuel pressure. So pretty important little spacer to have. So, but when I try to put that on the new pump, it gives us issues. It sits too high because of those little nipple things on there. So you can see the difference in the two. It's nice and flat. Those aren't. So I got a plan. We'll see how it works. I'm just trying to go in here carefully, notch out for those two little nubs that's sticking up, and see if I can't get that to lay down flush like it does on the original pump. Then our spacing will be correct. So let's do that. So now this is what it looks like now. I just turned on my bench grinder, laid it on the side of the rock on the corner edge. And now I'm going to put that on here. Push it down. Now it's nice and flat. Put that on there. My spacing is correct. All right, so let's see about putting this together again. Maybe get a finalized version and start working on my wires. Okay, all looks good. I think that will be the final draft. I just got to get my wires hooked up next. It's all secure. The socket's on there. Everything's nice and snug. Spacer's in place. So let's see about hooking up some wires. Oh, and by the way, make sure you're ready, like your final step, putting that sock on there, because once you get it on there, if you try to pull it off, you most likely rip it. Kind of like how this one did. Of course, it was 36 years old. It was bound to rip, but those can be kind of difficult to get off once you shove them on there. So I got that on there. So now let's work on our wires. Okay, you see I got my wires prepped up here, and got me some heat shrink. I'm going to solder these real well. Put the heat shrink on there and shrink that up, and we'll be able to go for a test. Oh, and you may have noticed I put a positive and negative on my connections here, so I know exactly which wire went where. So here's the ground wire, here's my hot. And I'd make for a bad day, hook it up backward, have the pump spinning in reverse. It wouldn't pump too much fuel that way. All right, got me plenty of flux on there, get the wire good and hot. Okay, I've got it tested here, running just fine. Got really good flow and really good pressure. I can't hold it back. If I put my thumb on it, there's no way I can stop it. I could stop the old pump real easy. So we are wired up correctly. So now all we got to do is put it in the car and see if it'll start. Well, here's the final assembly. Pump installed, tested, wires are heat shrinked. Everything's ready to go back in the car and fire it up. Here we go. Okay, reinstall time. Let me see now. I don't know if I can do this one-handed or not. Let's try it. I better not. I better try it two hands. Yeah, it took two hands to manipulate the sock to get it in there. Just ease it in. Hook the wires. By the way, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, so I'm trying to be somewhat quiet. There she goes. Alright, so put these bolts in there, hook everything up, and see if I got pressure. Well, the moment of truth is upon us. Remember, put in your double clamps on your high pressure line. Get all that done, tightened up. My harness is connected. Now let's remember the start sequence. We would turn on the key. The fuel pump comes on for just 2 seconds to pressurize the rail. So let's see what happens. Okay, let's get here, key on, get the light on the gauge. Hey, looky there, we got pressure. Now let's see if it'll start. Awesome. Okay. Seems to be running about 30 psi, spiked up to about 40 when I shut it off. I'm gonna look up to some more specs, but hey, we got it running. Okay, it's the next day. So I've bled the line off, 0 psi. Put the key in, see what happens. Key on, look at there. Jumps up to 40, drops down, sitting there about 30 or so. All right, let's fire it up, see what it does. All right, so we're idling at 30, then we give it the gas. Okay, do an experiment, see if this will record this here. Can you see it? Well, I think this is complete. In case I didn't show it before, here's your Schrader valve where you put your fuel gauge on. Just take your gauge off. There's the Schrader valve. Alright, so I think this project is done. I was driving down the road. I don't know if I got good footage of it or not, but I was getting like 38 psi going down the road, so I'll take it for another test drive. But anyway, she's all fixed up now. Well, I know this video is running a little long, but I want to do a little recap and talk about shop manuals. If you got a Corvette, you can get your hold of one of these shop manuals. They're worth their weight in gold because it's going to tell you everything there is about that car. And the nice thing about if you want a sports car cheap, these are when you get the C4s in the 80s, you can pick them up pretty reasonable. And they're early computer stuff, so it's relatively easy to work on yourself. It's even pre-OBD2 computer stuff. So, but anyway, and that's kind of what I use to kind of give you an idea with this manual. And it's got everything about the fuel system totally. So just like how I just got done doing, you know, I checked the fuel pump, and it runs step by step. You know, do you put on your gauge? We did that. Do we have fuel pressure? If not, follow the line here. Come down. Then no pressure. Do your next step. Then we went on down. We checked the fuel filter, and of course it wasn't plugged. As I've on down here, because oh yeah, I know we did the jump test. Remember that little that connector? This little connector here underneath the dash. When you apply 12 volts power to G, it automatically powers up the fuel pump, forces it to come on. And like with this system, if you want to pull the codes out of it, you put a little jumper wire between A and B, and then it flashes, the light flashes at you, different sequences, and you decipher it out what it means. But you just follow the book step by step, and you can just fix it yourself. Relatively easy. You can follow instructions. You can fix those cars yourself. But I want to talk about these parts now. See, when I first pulled this up, I seen I could get this fuel pump complete kit for $19.69 for that Corvette. But I just don't trust a $19 fuel pump in my wife's car, because I don't want to have that phone call when she goes to start her car and she's stranded somewhere. So I didn't want to cheap out. So now it would have been probably easier for me because it came with a harness and all this stuff. It might have been a simpler install, but I wanted a high quality fuel pump, so that's why I went with the Delphi. Here it is. There's the Delphi pump that I went with, and there's the Delphi fuel separator, I think what they call it, fuel strainer. And but the tricky part I ran into is dealing with that connector right there, because it did not come with that connector. But here are all the different OEM numbers for that connector. So if you're looking for it, you can track it down by Googling any of these numbers. There's a few aftermarket companies make them, or you get it through an OEM or GM dealer. But anyway, I think that'll wrap this up. She's running good. Drove it down the road. I'm getting, I think, 38 psi or 40, depending on how much I put my foot into it. So thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. Have a great day. Bye. Well, my curiosity is getting the best of me. I got to thinking, okay, I know the fuel pump is bad, so yeah, replace it. But I got to thinking, well, why did it go bad? After 36 years of this fuel pump humming along just fine, why now did it decide to stop? So I went to my grinder, took the outer casing, sliced it in half, got it opened up. And first of all, I was kind of surprised. Actually, it's a brush type motor. That's kind of interesting. But look at the brushes. It's got plenty of life left in those brushes. I could have went for another 36 years. So that wasn't the problem. You see the armature here. It's got some scratches and stuff in it, but it was still turning and spinning. That part was working fine. So I kept going down the line, and here was the failure. The failure was this little spline. That was the weak link. Because when this thing is assembled, turn it around, you see there's like a gear right there. And this little spline fits into it, locks it in place. That in turn fits on top of the pump like that and spins it really fast. So see this right here is supposed to lock in with this piece, and it would just, it wouldn't do it. Actually, yeah, it wasn't turning at all, but I call it like a primary pump. This was still spinning because it goes through, and this little shaft connects to this vein. So I call it that's like like a charge pump. Because that's just at the very bottom. This is where this sits. That's where the intake comes in. That's where that sock was on. And well, actually, I had it upside down. Yeah, it sits like that. And the gear goes in there. And this is like that. So that thing's spinning super fast. So by centrifugal force, the fuel slings out to the side. As it slings out to the side, it's forced up that little notch right there. It comes out here, kind of like a charge pump. Then it enters into, well, I call it more like the high pressure pump. If I turn this over, I'm going to make a mess. Put this back together like that. So the way it sits, it feeds it into this slot. So as it's spinning, the fuel comes up in there. I believe these are called like a gerotor pump, I think is the term for these. You can see it's kind of offset. So that thing spins really fast. My big fingers keep getting in the way. As it spins really fast, these little rollers sling out to the side, and it compresses as it comes around here, it compresses the fuel. And then, well, which way? No, actually, it's rotating the other direction. I just dropped one. So because it's offset, it rotates around. That bird magnetic thing. So it rotates. It kind of creates a little bit of a suction here because it opens up. But then as the roller comes around, it starts squeezing. See, this area gets smaller. As it comes around this side, it squeezes, ain't got nowhere to go. Where am I going to go? It pushes it out this slot. So you got a wide opening here, and narrow opening here. The fuel's got to go somewhere. You can't compress fuel. So it comes up this slot. And then where does it go from there? Good question. It feeds up around the pump through the motor. Okay, so we've got check valves up here. Oh, I guess it just flows directly through. That's what it does. That's how it keeps it cool. So the fuel is actually flowing. Check this out. So the fuel is flowing all around this little motor. As that motor is spinning, fuel is passing all around it through these brushes, then up into this area, because you got little check valves. Because remember, so this is where the pressure comes out at, you know, like 40 psi. Ain't that cool? But that's fascinating. That little thing's been spinning for 36 years and pumping all that fuel all those days, and the weak link was that little part right there. And of course, the one I put in there, I don't know if it'll last 36 years or not. And I'm just kind of curious. I wonder how its design is. Of course, I ain't gonna take it apart. It's already in the car, but I thought that was kind of interesting how that was laid out. I never knew, but now I do. Cool.